Pitch, Audible, Compass, Futureproof Yourself, Antibiotics, BBC World Service, iPlayer, Reith Lectures, BBC Radio 4. iPlayer. Pitch is a new podcast for anyone who thinks they know everything about contemporary pop music. It spins out from the familiar "I love it, I hate it, music is who I am" idea of pop, to push at the edges of music and identity. Ooh, this is an interesting series, right from the start. The first episode had British journalist Alex Marshall investigating nasheeds, the songs of Islamic State. Of course, ISIS, as a radical Islamist group, shouldn't allow music, but nasheeds are classified by ISIS as a cappella poems, despite the fact that they have quite catchy choruses, and sometimes use auto-tune. Apparently, auto-tune isn't technically an instrument. Anyhow, these jihadist propaganda songs experiment with several genres, including, said Marshall, AY slow jam, and are used as one of the tools of extreme radicalization. If that sounds ludicrous, Marshall provided the chilling example of one man who listened to nasheeds on repeat for 2 weeks. Then that man went to Nice and deliberately drove a lorry along the seafront, killing 86 people. French nasheeds seem to be the most insidious, with lyrics celebrating the Bataclan attack, vowing bloodshed and perpetrating a victim mentality. Though depressing, it's all thoroughly interesting, and certainly makes you think about music as something other than an accompaniment to adverts. The 9-part series of Pitch, released all at once on Audible, does this throughout, covering topics such as the UAL politics of soccer, whether you should ever record a gig on your phone, and what music appeals to animals. Recommended. If you like to think about the horizons of culture, Futureproof Yourself from the World Service may also be up your street. Presenters Ben Hammersley and Alex Krotosk, who have already considered robots, last week took on antibiotics and the question of whether they will work in the future. Bacteria, good or bad, have a tendency to spread quickly, and right now 700,000 people are dying every year of drug-resistant infections. The drugs, well, the antibiotics, don't work. And it's not just through human infection. Antibiotics have also long been used in the factory farming of chickens, and getting into our systems that way. An expert commented, "I don't see these as factories of meat, but as factories making trillions and trillions of drug-resistant bacteria." The program began with something as simple as washing your hands, and ended with methods of discovering new antibiotics, through something called microbial dark matter. As with most World Service programs, this is clear and traditional audio making, without the distraction of soundscapes. Krotowski and Hammersley are likable and upbeat, even in the face of bizarre science and our potentially rubbish collective future. 2018 Reith lecturer Margaret Macmillan asks what war is good for. Photograph, BBC, Richard Ansett. If you want to understand your future, look to the past. This year's Reith Lectures promise to help us with that. Professor Margaret Macmillan has set her stall out as war, what is it good for, etc., and whether armed conflict is an essential part of human life. War and Humanity is the title of her lectures, and in the first one, she pointed out that war is something that requires a good deal of organization. She believes that the creation of society, as we moved from being hunter-gatherers into settled communities, grew parallel to, and hand in hand with, the creation of war. To see war as something that is always totally destructive and doesn't lead to any improvement in the human condition, I think is wrong, she said. We would like to say, surely there must be some other way of bringing advances, but so far we don't seem to be very good at finding one. Music as war, and war as advancing the human condition. Consider my view of society, thoroughly upturned. 3 shows about history, hardcore historians, dancarlin.com. History podcasts are often on the long side, and for that we can blame, or thank, Dan Carlin. Creator of Common Sense, another hugely successful podcast, Carlin has been broadcasting for years. His flair for drama and anecdote keeps you gripped, and he's not scared to go in deep, with chosen topics stretching out over several episodes. His narrative take on the First World War is excellent. It's interesting to hear it from a US perspective, and his examination of the Second World War was deemed by Slate to be the 5th best podcast of all time. History on Fire, HistoryOnFirePodcast.com. Italian-American University professor Daniele Bolelli is our host, and he was inspired by Dan Carlin's hardcore history to make his own history podcast. Bolelli's Italian accent takes a little time to get used to, but his 3-parter on the parallel U.S. military massacres of Native Americans at Sand Creek and Vietnamese at My Lai is spectacular. In the third part, a U.S. veteran talks about both of these massacres and how today's U.S. Army tries to avoid such atrocities happening, but how hard that is to accomplish. In Our Time, bbc.co.uk. No collection of history talkies would be complete without In Our Time. This Radio 4 stalwart, coming up for its 20th birthday, refuses to underestimate its audience. Melvin Bragg corrals his highly qualified guests to gallop through topics as varied as Hildegard of Bingen and Gödel's incompleteness theorems, with an occasional exclamation along the lines of "Oh God, we've forgotten the Vikings." There's history, culture, philosophy, religion and science. And with more than 800 episodes, you can expand your knowledge again and again. An antidote to anti-experts.